Morning, family.
Morning.
Acts chapter 9, beginning in verse 36, carrying through verse 43. Now there was in Joppa a disciple named Tabitha, which, translated, means Dorcas. She was full of good works and acts of charity. In those days she became ill and died, and when they had washed her, they laid her in an upper room. Now since Lydda was near Joppa, the disciples, hearing that Peter was there, sent 2 men to him, urging him, "Please come to us without delay." So Peter rose and went with them. And when he arrived, they took him to the upper room, and all the widows stood beside him, weeping and showing tunics and other garments that Dorcas made while she was with them. But Peter put them all outside and knelt down and prayed and turned to the body and said, "Tabitha, arise." And she opened her eyes. And when she saw Peter, she sat up, and he gave her his hand and raised her up. And then calling the saints and widows, he presented her alive. And became known throughout all Joppa, and many believed in the Lord, and he stayed in Joppa for many days with Simon, a tanner.
Thank you. Good morning again. I love hearing all this life. The children playing, the hugs, some crying this morning, some excitement. Just there's a lot of joy and there's a lot of life indicators of life. Sometimes it's thoughts in our head, voices in our head, but there's a lot of witness to life in here this morning, and I appreciate that. We are going to look at Acts chapter 9, and it's a passage I haven't dug into deeply before until these past couple of weeks looking at it, and it is spectacular. There's so much in it. I want you to tell me, just shout out a word that stands out to you in this passage. If you're listening to Michael read it and looking at it there, what's a word that stands out to you? Okay? What else? What word?
Get up.
Get up.
Arise.
Okay. 2 more.
Without delay.
Good works. Yeah. So many directions you could go with this passage. So I'm going to handle it similarly to how I did with the triumphal entry passage last time I preached here, where we went through and looked at the insights, and then at the end it's all going to come together, hopefully, into what I think is Luke's point in this passage. Luke wrote the book of Acts. He wrote them together, Luke, Acts, we say. So though this passage is in Acts chapter 9, it's written by Luke. And one thing we see here right from the top is that the woman has 2 names, Tabitha and Dorcas. And by the way it reads, she likely went by Dorcas, but it's kind of hard to tell. But either way, we have a woman who is existing in 2 worlds. Some of you might be able to relate to that. It strikes me at our leadership meetings, sometimes Michael's phone will ring and he'll answer the phone. This is Mike. This is Mike, because he's Michael to us. Some of you are Stephen in one state and Steve in another. Or Rebecca at home, but Becca to everyone else. We have different names, but these 2 names are more different than that. There is Tabitha, which is an Aramaic word coming from the Hebrew. That's who she was in that world. And then there's Dorcas, which is a Greek name, as she navigated the Greco-Roman world. 2 completely different worlds. Her Hebrew story is traced all the way back to Abraham, but in the Greek world, when she navigates that, it's traced back to Zeus. The Hebrew table that she would set in her home would never serve bacon, but when she would go to her Greek friends' houses, well, pork would be a regular entree. She would go out about into town, could hear both names shouted at her, maybe pulling her in 2 different directions. People might say Tabitha when she would go to the synagogue, first as a Jew, and then it seems to be a Jewish convert to the Way, what those early Christians were called, who were Jewish, followers of the Way. But she was also an entrepreneur. And in the Greek world, where she sold her clothes, she paid her taxes to Caesar, and her Roman clients, for whom she made these clothes, made their checks out to Dorcas. These cultures were vastly different, and Tabitha/Dorcas was navigating both of them, 2 people in 2 different worlds. So maybe she was tired. Not only tired as a friend and a business owner, but as a disciple. There's this word here, mathatria, and it's the only time it shows up in the whole New Testament. It's from the original word matatis, which means disciple, but the only time it says mathatria is right here. It means a female disciple. She was known for her good works. That's a word that stood out to some of you. Full of good works and acts of charity. Some of your translations might say that they abounded through her, or they filled her, or she was always doing them. This translation says she was full of good works and acts of charity that she continually did. As two people in two different worlds, maybe she was tired. And that's a claim you sometimes hear with this narrative. That because she was so good and she did all these good things, that's why she was healed. As if there's this karmic tit-for-tat retribution principle going on. She did all these great things, so she received the gift of healing, but we need to be leery of that because the rest of the gospel, the rest of the Bible doesn't point to that being something that's true. We don't receive God's blessings for us because we've earned them. Our good works don't always necessarily land in this place where we get stuff. God is God, not us. And God will move where God sees fit to move. And we are faithful. We are called to do these good works and acts of charity. That's absolutely what we should be doing, but not to get something. But because we're thankful. And in reality, the text hints at the opposite truth. While she was doing these good works, while she was continually doing acts of charity, she got sick and died. Maybe she was tired. But none of that seems to be Luke's point to me. I think Luke's point is found in Mark chapter 5. A little bit about the synoptic gospels. The three synoptics, what are they? The three synoptic gospels? Do we know?
Matthew, Mark, Luke.
Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Yeah, those are the three that are most similar together. And which of those was written first? Mark, yeah. So Mark is written first. That's the original written down. And then Matthew and Luke took from Mark's gospel to write their gospel, which is why you can see almost the exact same words sometimes in Matthew and Luke that you find in Mark. And so Luke, who wrote Acts, pulls from Mark chapter 5 here. There's a correlation. And back in Mark chapter 5, I'll put it up. You can turn there if you want. We have a story about Jesus. And I'm going to read it, and as I do, I want you to hear for similarities between this story with Jesus and the story about Tabitha in Acts chapter 9, okay? Then one of the synagogue leaders named Jairus came. And when he saw Jesus, he fell at his feet. He pleaded earnestly with him, "My little daughter is dying. Please come and put your hands on her so that she will be healed and live." So Jesus went with him. And as Jesus goes, the story is interrupted by the bleeding woman who reaches out and touches Jesus' garment. We have that, and then 10 verses later, it jumps back in to Jairus' story. While Jesus was speaking about the woman who touched his garment, some people came from the house of Jairus, the synagogue leader. "Your daughter is dead," they said. "Why bother the teacher anymore?" Overhearing what they said, Jesus told him, "Don't be afraid, just believe." He did not let anyone follow him except Peter, James, and John, the brother of Jesus. When they came to the home of the synagogue leader, Jesus saw a commotion with people crying and wailing loudly. He went in and said to them, "Why all this commotion and wailing? The child is not dead, but asleep." But they laughed at him. And after he put them all out, told them to leave the room, he took the child's father and mother and the disciples who were with him and went into where the child was. He took her by the hand and said to her, "Talitha cum," which means, "Little girl, get up." Immediately, the girl stood up and began to walk around. She was 12 years old. At this, they were completely astonished, and he gave strict orders not to let anyone know about this. and told them to give her something to eat. I think that's my favorite part. Everyone is like, oh, she's alive, and Jesus is like, she's hungry, give her something to eat. But these two resurrection stories have so many similarities within them. As you can see in red here, both people are Jewish, of Jewish descent. In both cases, the people urge the healer to come with haste. In both cases, the person is dead. I know in the case in Mark 5, Jesus says she's but sleeping, but he meant she's not permanently dead. Dead is dead. People knew what dead was then, the same way that people know what dead is now. And in both cases, the people are told to leave the room so that the healer can go in and bring healing, either alone, in the case with Peter, or with the child's parents and Peter, in the case of Mark 5. Both have people mourning, standing around, crying, and then there's the Aramaic. And this is where I think Luke is making his point in Acts chapter 9 in our story about Tabitha today. In the Aramaic, one of 7 places in the Bible where the writer keeps the Aramaic words, Talitha kum, little girl, get up. And there's only one letter difference in the Aramaic between Talitha and Tabitha, which is really how you pronounce that word. Talitha, get up. Tabitha, get up. And in both cases, the person once dead gets up, and in both cases, the people are amazed at this miracle. Luke wants us to make this connection between the two stories. And you probably can hear other stories if you know your Bible well, some of you with more biblical literacy. You're like, doesn't that sound like Elisha and the Shunammite woman? Doesn't that sound like Elijah raising the widow's son? And it does. Common themes, common words. William Loader says Peter, here with the Tabitha story, is like Jesus in the Talitha kum story. And Jesus is like Elijah and Elisha, and all are like God. They raise the dead to life. They raise the dead to life. I think this is Luke's point. Luke wants to make sure that we read one more resurrection story. One more that doesn't have to do with Jesus. He wants us to see Peter raise Tabitha from the dead. He wants us to see Peter go into the room alone, into that death space. He wants us to hear Peter say the words, get up. He wants us to see Peter reach out his hand. Peter, the rock of the church. Peter, a complicated disciple of Christ, by the power of God, reach out his hand and lift up another disciple from the dead. This is Luke's point. Raising people from the dead did not die with Jesus. It is a power, it is a witness, it is a mission of the church. And I know we're quick to say, well, that doesn't happen today, dead people stay dead. This was an apostolic miracle. It doesn't apply to us, and I want to challenge that strongly because it's the same world. People stayed dead then, just like dead people stay dead today. The other people who witnessed this miracle in Tabitha's room, they died and stayed dead. The 12 apostles, most of whom died as martyrs, nobody came and raised them from the dead. Which should blow that theory that if you're good enough, you get miracles of God out of the water. They were good. Something else that's true now that was true then, we all mourn death. We mourn it, we wail it, we cry out and ask for healing today, just like we did then. Friends and family members wail in the streets. In hospital rooms and in war zones, we cry out to God, bring her back, heal him. We, like them, would send for desperate help to hurry and come when that flatline alarm goes off in the intensive care unit, and we cry out for the doctors to shock her one more time, intubate, try again. It's only been 15 minutes that they've been gone. Keep trying, bring them back to life. It's the same desperate cry today that they had then. And sometimes today, just like then, people are resurrected. It happens. The flat line beeps again. When nothing is left to do but pray for the child at the side of the pool, she coughs up water and oxygen fills her lungs. We have these stories too. Sometimes the answer is yes, sometimes the answer is no, but we can't let the no's shout louder than the yeses in our soul. But there's a key difference here between what we think is going on that contributes to our skepticism. We call these resurrections when they're not. They're resuscitations. That's what this is. Every single dead to life story we have in the Bible is a resuscitation. Lazarus, raised from the dead, is resuscitated. The Shunammite woman's son, resuscitation. Jairus' daughter was resuscitated. Tabitha was resuscitated. And these are miracles, don't get me wrong. I mean, Lazarus was 4 days dead. That is a miracle, but it's a resuscitation. They came back into the same condition they left. They came back into the same body they left, the same age they left, the same DNA with the same propensity toward Alzheimer's or cancer as when they left. They came back and had to go to the same job maybe the next day or a couple of days later. The same environment just to die again later. These are miracles, but they merely delayed the inevitable because people now, just like people then, die. There's only one story that's a resurrection, and that's Jesus. He rose to a new body. A body that walked through doors and ate food. And I don't understand that. I cannot explain it to you. He resurrected into a new reality, into a glorified state, into a new kingdom, a new mission. He resurrected into a body that would never die again, into this eternity, because resurrection and resuscitation are not the same thing. And resuscitation is not off the table for us. It is a very true reality as a mission and purpose of the church. But here's the big question for the church. Which one do we prefer? Which one do we beg for? Which one do we desire, to be resuscitated or to be resurrected? And do we get bummed and lose faith and struggle when we don't see enough resuscitations? When dead people stay dead, and where is God, and why didn't He answer that prayer, when all the while you have received the greater gift of resurrection? And that's not enough, because people aren't resuscitated. Are we that short-sighted? So demanding of God to work in our ways and our times to give us the smaller gift, not appreciating the much, much greater gift of resurrection. Because family, here's the good news. We get both. We have, by Christ, the opportunity to be resuscitated. And it's up to God, it's His choice when He wants that to happen. But it's possible for us. And for all of us, we have received resurrection. We have the opportunity for both. And that's what Luke wants us to know with Tabitha. Resuscitation did not die with Jesus. He wants us to see one disciple of the church go to another disciple of the church in that private death space. One disciple to see another disciple dead, vacant through her eyes. Another disciple to walk through that valley of the shadow of death, through the wailing and through the crying and through the desperation, and to see this other disciple in dire need of life and to kneel down by her bed and pray. He needs us to see a disciple shout over that dying disciple, "Get up!" To cling to that mustard seed of life in that disciple, cast out the death, and say, "Get up." And all she has the strength to do is sit up. And Luke wants us to see this disciple reach out his hand and pull this disciple up to her feet when she cannot get up by herself. This is a mission and a purpose and a power of the the church today as much as it was then. In this age, death is tendriling through. Sometimes literally in hospital beds when the doctor is calling the time of death. Maybe a marriage has died. Maybe an identity a disciple was holding on to has disintegrated and they don't know who they are anymore. Maybe a dream is dead. A ministry is dying. A child has died. Hope dies. Our abilities and our faculties die as we age. Death is all around us. Look around the room. Where do you see death right now? Who's dying in here right now? Who is exhausted from these good works that are consuming their days? Who is dead from being too many people in too many situations to too many audiences? Who can't stand up by themselves? Who has that vacant death stare in their eyes? Whose pulse has flatlined? Whose soul has gangrene? Church, this is your mission, to go to that disciple and say, by the power of Jesus, get up. What kind of witness does the church have in the world if the church is lying dead in her bed? Not even trying. What kind of Christ does the world see when the world's daggers of illness and anxiety and depression and disease and injustice and death keep us down, when we won't even ask to be risen again because, well, that doesn't happen anymore. When we don't even ask or try or seek help, what kind of faith are we holding on to when we think it's all on us? To lift myself up as if Jesus died for nothing and the church has no mission. Sometimes people stay dead. And those no's can cause us not even to ask for the yeses. When I was at Pepperdine a couple of weeks ago, that last day we were about to leave, and it was, lectureships, when you're in those environments, it's just joy and energy, and everyone is singing, and it's just fantastic. And then it showed up on the news that Rachel Held Evans died. And if you don't know who she is, you can Google it later. But it was a big deal for a lot of us. And you could watch it. You could watch people pick up their phone and tears. And people would sit down. It was like a cloud rolled through the campus. This was a woman that people had prayed over her bedside, anointed her with oil. My girlfriends and I were praying and fasting for this healing for 3 weeks, and God said no. A 37-year-old woman full of good works and acts of charity, working for the church with 2 little babies, and God says no. But she is resurrected. That's the greater gift. That's what it's for. We can't get so caught up in the no's of resuscitations when we've been given the yes of resurrection.
Amen.
Sometimes it doesn't make any sense to us, but we keep asking, we keep running into the street, we keep begging, we keep seeking help, we keep going to the disciples, we keep looking for death, and we keep casting it out because it's a mission of the church. I know you're tired. I know some of you are weary. There's a woman, a stranger to us, on our couch downstairs in the bistro right now who had one heck of a night. For some of you, you are spread too thin. Your hope is gone, but I'm not going to let you lay down and die. That's not what ministers do for each other. We're not going to let you give up. The perseverance, persistence, and durability of the church is the church's witness to the world. When the church rises up again and again and again, resuscitated again and again and again, even in situations that would or could or should kill anybody else, it points to the greater gift, resurrection. It teaches the world there is a resurrection. The yeses of resuscitation are witness to the greater gift. We are resurrection people. We have participated in Jesus' death and his rising. We are alive forever. And if you can believe that, surely you can believe that God has the power to resuscitate people every now and again. Surely we have the strength within us to go to each other and ask for and expect and speak life into each other's lives. That's small potatoes compared to resurrection. This is your mission. This is your mission right now. This is your mission this week. If you dare and feel comfortable, raise your hand if you feel dead right now. Raise your hand if something within you is dying. Raise your hand if there is gangrene on your soul or part of your heart feels irreparably broken. And we look around, and we see the tears, and we see the body language. So hold the hand of the person next to you, please. One long line all the way through. And as Peter, a very broken, imperfect disciple of the church, went to another disciple of the church who loved and was strengthened and was probably a little bit tired, went to her in her moment of death and spoke in Jesus' name for her to get up. Family, get up. Stand up. Get up. And when Tabitha could not get up, he pulled her up so she could live another day. Because these new days that we live are the witness to the world that we have an endless number of days as resurrection people who live for eternity. This is who you are.